Good morning, guys. Up first today, we have Robert Collins, who is a distinguished technologist working at HP Cloud Services. He lives in Rangiora, New Zealand with his family, and he's here today to talk about adventures in Pipland. Robert Collins.
Good morning. So we've got a fair amount to cover, and we may not have time for questions at the end. If there's something that really is concerning you, please just throw a hand up, ask, and I'll repeat the question so we don't have to wait for microphones to move around or any of that. But more importantly, I have chocolates here for folk who can guess some of the terrible things I'm going to tell you about. And our excellent room helper will be running those out to whoever can come up with the answer. So pip is a wonderful tool. It's taken quite a few years to get where it is, but I'm going to be talking about some stuff that's kind of bad. So remember, I respect the people who have built this, and I'm one of those people, so if there's anything negative, it reflects on me as well. And you know, let's go and see where we go. So pip's actually called pyinstall from pyinstaller.org, which is the thing that's like a bit like freeze. It bundles everything up into a single binary, and then it got split out. 7 years ago. So for 7 years, we've had this tool that was built to be something rather different that's actually doing this thing we really depend upon all the time. And even though some of the history was lost, there's over 4,000 commits in the tree. So it's a fairly mature tool, you'd think. But 70% of the downloads from PyPy are done through pip. You can't read the little things down the side here, but this big bit here, that's pip.
Is that from user agents?
This is from the logs that Donald Stuff pulled up. He did a blog post, which is the link there. This is setuptools, this is pip, and this is PyPy mirror, and then the rest is noise. And I show this to really make you very afraid. Not a lot of it's my code, but enough of it that you should be afraid. You should be worried, because it's a moving target. The packaging ecosystem doesn't stand still. It's hard to move within the packaging ecosystem. But in the last 2 years, we've gone up 3 major versions, and there's been a whole bunch of point releases in there. I've skipped all the intervening ones, like 1.5.4 and 1.5.3 and things like that. The problem with moving targets is that people have to upgrade to get the benefit from them. So here, this is pip 1.4. Fortunately, it looks like pip 1.0 has completely disappeared off the map, which means people aren't using Ubuntu Precise anymore. I'll come back to that later. 1.5, 6.0, unknown. So anything using URL-lib and not putting a version identifier into it. So when I said it's very good that no one is using pip 1.0, this might be pip 1.0. And this orange bar here, this was like 2 or 3 weeks after 6.1 was released, and you can see there's some adoption there, but the adoption is only changing in that 6.0, 6.1 region. All the people who are running their binaries on their Linux system that got installed by the distro vendor, they're not changing. I want to give some context on all the sorts of challenges pip has. It installs from pretty much everything except bdist eggs and the binary distributions that existed before wheels. So it can install from a local directory on your disk, or from a VCS, from a regular wheel, from an sdist. So if you can think of some way of describing your code that's different to that, you're probably more imaginative than me. And it installs everywhere. It installs into your system, it can install into user directories, it can install into an isolated directory, it can install into a virtual environment, and it can install as eggs, which is so deprecated, but it can still do it. All of this to say that it can also install itself by your own bootstraps. And that's some of the more scary code around, because it's a curl thing, right? Download get pip.py from the internet and run that, and you end up with pip installed in your system. And the reason you need to do that is if you use pip that's installed in your system by a distro vendor to install pip, it doesn't always go well. And it also has to support all of the Pythons, including the ones that aren't supported by anyone, like Python 2.6. Because when we say, hey, let's stop supporting that, you can keep using the last stable release of pip. People go, hey, hang on, I'm still running my cluster on RHEL 2.6 or Scientific Linux 2.6, and sorry, you need to care about me. Now, this isn't really terrifying. This is just the context for where it gets terrifying. Let's start by talking about uninstall. Uninstall is easier than install, right? You just have to delete some files from disk. So you look up the name in the packaging database on your local machine about where things have been installed, what's been installed, and then you delete them. So here we get to audience participation step number 1. I have a chocolate here. If someone can guess what is horrifying about this simple list of things.
Multiple packages of different versions installed.
That's a thing that might turn up, but that's not this one.
Another package that depends on it.
No.
Entry doesn't exist in the database.
Multiple package managers? No, this is just pip, so it's
Extra files that it created.
all right. This will sit on the side. No, it's not going to jackpot because I have less chocolates than I have horrors, and I gambled that people would have to work up to them. So when you have something in your system packages and you make a virtual env using -- system site, sorry, there is a typo already, system site packages, then pip could technically delete from your system environment, but it has to decide, actually, no, this is a virtual env. I'm not allowed to delete this thing that is installed, but not installed in the virtual env, even though everything in Python uses it. So you get this thing where you say, please uninstall this thing. It says, actually, no, I can't uninstall that. And -- user has a kind of similar effect. But it's all right. There's another chance for chocolates. Another thing that makes uninstalling stuff using pip kind of complex. None of the things that were spoken before. This is another thing altogether. No, I mean, yes, that sort of genuine bug can turn up, but it's not something that makes me want to crawl into a hole somewhere and comfort food for days at a time. No?
Was not installed with pip originally.
Well, that's actually a very, very close one. You might get a chocolate for this. Develop mode. Python setup.py develop, which is close enough to what Graham said, or pip install -e, a thing, installs it in develop mode. So if you want to have some fun on your laptops, make a virtual env. In that, do pip install something, so like check out mock or your favorite personal project, and do pip install dot to install that thing. Then do pip install -e dot to install it in editable mode. Even though it's already installed, it will install quite happily. Then do pip uninstall the name of the thing, and it will ask you to delete a single file, and if you say yes, you can still use the thing, it's still installed. It didn't actually uninstall it. And well, you can install it again. Yes, and you can uninstall it a second time, which will actually uninstall the thing that you actually installed because you've been getting rid of a symlink, essentially. But the really fun thing about this is that there's no locking around the easy install PTH files. So that has a list of all the things that are in develop mode. And if you run pip uninstall in 2 separate terminals at the same time to uninstall different things, you are not going to like what you get back afterwards.
What do you get back afterwards?
Something you don't like. So, this one actually has come up before. Who said multiple databases? Right, who said it first? One of you two gets the chocolate there. My lovely assistant can, yeah, Katie. All right, so there are 6 different installation databases pip has to consult when it tries to uninstall something from your local system. There's the flat egg info. A bunch of this is abstracted out by package resources, you'd say. But actually, there is a 6-way if, else, if, else, if, else, if, else, if, else, if, else inside the pip uninstall code. So basic eggs, namespaced eggs, distutils eggs, which aren't really eggs, eggs, develop eggs, and then the distinfo stuff, which is maybe going to be do not suggest new formats. The packaging ecosystem people will be saying this, even they are very polite and say that's a wonderful idea and let's look through the implications. All right, so I want to talk about pip install now. Pip install is a really easy process, right? You find a package to install, or packages. You find its dependencies, and you repeat this recursively until everything's installed. Well, so there's a couple of things that make this a little bit complex. One is that as a design principle, pip doesn't want to half do something. So it wants to know that the whole thing is going to work or fail, even though the system on disk isn't atomic and there are no file system transactions that are accessible from user space. And okay, so the yak stack goes all the way down if you want to fix that. But what it does do is does everything it can to be confident that the process is going to succeed before it starts doing the first installation. So if you look at easy install, which we'll talk about more later, it does a rather different approach. And obviously, you need to install everything at the end. That's what I was talking about there, is that you put together what you're going to install and then you install it. So finding packages, straightforward problem, right? You've got a package name, you go and find it from PyPy, everyone's happy. Except for find links. Who here is familiar with find links? Right, so 2 people. 3. Well, we've nearly 5. Okay, hands come up or that. Find links is a deprecated feature that can't be removed from pip. Deprecated but can't be removed. Let that sink in for a bit. In it, you tell pip, hey, here is a URL, and in that URL there are going to be some links, and those links are going to have the form in the expression of them that looks like a tarball or a wheel or an egg or something like that. And we're going to scan that URL for these links, and then we're going to pass them through our thing that recognizes versions and try and split out the name from the beginning of it. And then we're going to use that to decide exactly what to install. Now, this is kind of safe if it's your local directory on disk and you've got wheels and Estes that you downloaded using pip in there, and that's, for example, what a wheelhouse looks like. But it's much less safe if you're looking at some random web server that might have been taken over by a hacker and now actually points at completely different things that you didn't think you were going to be getting. So it's deprecated because it's terrible. But we can't remove it because enough people depend on this for stuff within their organization that apparently it's critical functionality, and we have to keep this kind of, no, you can't have it, but we can't get rid of it. PEP 426 describes a replacement that gives it the same functionality. It's no better. And so I have just completely destroyed the ability to offer you another piece of chocolate. So I'm sorry about that. I got too excited. Direct references in PEP 440 describe the replacement evolution of this feature. And it's going to have exactly the same characteristics that you can point. Oh, wow. Okay, so no, this is the other thing. There is a chocolate for me here because I've just told you about this horror. The thing that's worse than find links is the ability to just point directly to VCS. Not from the command line, pip install git this thing, I know what I want, but to have a dependency that points at a git URL or at a file on disk in some arbitrary place. So you can upload something to PyPy and you can pip install that thing, and then if pip is being used, it will look at the dependencies and it will go off to git and pull that down. That is the intent of this feature specified in PEP 426 and 440. Except they say you will not be able to load these up to the indices because the indices will look at your dependencies and say that that's not allowed. We're going to get back to why that's a problem, an implementation problem in a little bit. But this is, again, a use case where people say we really, really have to have this to do our in-organization thing where we can't do proper versioning and publish things by names and so on, because it's very hard to do that for some reason. But we're still talking about finding the packages that you're going to use. And here is where horror number 5 turns up. Can anyone guess what it is? It's related to version numbers.
When a dependency depends on something at a different version.
When a dependency depends on something at a different version, yes. Yes, that is exactly the horror. The horror is that pip does not resolve versions at all. If you tell it, It finds versions, it doesn't resolve them. And the distinction is this. Resolving a version, if you've got two things, A and B, that both depend on C, and one says I need C greater than 1.0, and the other one says I need C less than 2.0, and the index has 1, 2, and 3 versions of C in the index, then something that resolves it would start with A, say, oh yeah, I'll grab 3, that's okay, would run into B somewhere else in your dependency tree and say, oh, I can't use 3 anymore, I'll use 2. And you'd end up installing C version 2. What pip does is it says, oh yeah, I found the version you want from your first description. You wanted greater than 1, I got you 3, and it will install 3 no matter what else has been turning up during the dependency graph it's been spidering across. And this, as you might imagine, breaks things. So the actual process is, you start with some URLs, you'll go and run this find links thing, and you'll talk to the indices, you'll look at what's locally installed, and then you'll choose between them on the basis of the first thing that sounds the same. Small sidebar here. I've actually got a working resolver, and although it is non-polynomial complete and might burn up the entire heat of the earth before it solves some of the problems, there's enough heuristics there, and the data set is sufficiently compact that it usually manages to chew out an answer in sort of a reasonable time, like a few seconds. But we need some answer to be able to take that forward to for the case where it is going to go off to the heat death of the universe, some way of overriding the resolver, and we need a UI for that. We need to do a bit of design work. But that's coming soon. So we've found the package version you're going to use. How do we get its dependencies out? Some systems like this have an index that knows the dependencies, like Debian has an index you can download locally and query that says this package depends on these versions. That can be really nice and quick and quite efficient. Some things have a web API you can talk to find out the dependencies. Well, no, we don't have that. There is one sort of current standard format where you can get the metadata out without running arbitrary code, and that's wheels. Wheels are a zip file. You open the zip, you examine the metadata file, you can put that metadata behind an API, and you could build an index file, or you could have an index that an API you can talk to on the PyPy servers to give you the metadata. But for everything else, you have to download it, unpack it, and then run setup.py-egginfo, which might try and take over your machine. I mean, it might not, but it might try and do that. Now, when you're installing something from PyPy, you are trusting that the thing you're choosing to install from PyPy isn't going to do that. And, I mean, that's kind of reasonable. If you want to use software from someone, you're going to assume that their software is actually fit for you to consume. But someone who's actually running the index server itself, they can't assume that, because there's like 78,000 separate packages in PyPy. And anyone can go along, create a new package, upload it, and so anyone could come along and try and attack PyPy if they allowed PyPy to try and figure this out. So we resolve this locally. Pip downloads the thing it's going to install, unpacks it on disk, and runs setup.py-egginfo. But there's a trick there. Can anyone guess what horror number 6 is? This is one of the things that made me sort of blink 3 or 4 times the first time I ran across it. Sorry? Malicious.payloads in setup.py. Good guess, but no cookie.
Non-semantic version.
Non-semantic version. Great guess. Completely off base.
The import that setup.py itself does.
The imports that setup.py itself does. Nope. All right, I'm gonna call time on this one. This code is inside pip. This is the actual setup.py that pip runs when it tries to run egginfo. It's a template. Under setup.py under ends up being the path to the setup.py file. And there's a bunch of stuff in here I've ripped out for brevity on the slide, but we open up the setuptools egginfo module and we monkey patch its run function to be this replacement run function I trimmed out, and that takes care of things that can't be imported when it's running this. And the reason it does this is because paste script has an egginfo writer entry point itself, and you can't get at paste.script.epdesk until you have successfully imported PasteScript, and you can't successfully import PasteScript until you have installed its dependencies. And you can't find out its dependencies until you have run eigenfo and interrogated the output to see what its dependencies are. So this here is to deal with that. But wait, there's more. What's another horror that turns up around about the same time?
Nested modules like also and also.utils?
Namespaces. Namespaces. Oh, I could rant about namespaces, but this is not a ranting talk. This is a tour through horrors. No, I'll give you guys a clue. 2 words. It's a name of a thing. 2 words. Yes. Well, for the recording, Katie just said, I already have one, it's fine. Oh, sorry, I'll have another one that she's now giving to Craig. So, easy install. Who here knows about easy install? Okay, so most of that, about half the room. All right. So easy install is this thing that is a precursor to pip becoming popular, and it goes off to the internet and runs some arbitrary code that literally they tell you to download easy under setup.py and just run it, which at the time was being served from an HTTP server, no risk there. And you download it and it would install setuptools and install recursively the thing you want to install. So it's kind of like a pseudo pip, except it was all bundled into the setup.py build system for your package. And it has this feature called setup requires. So setuptools has this feature called setup requires. So if you had a setup.py that looked something like that, then when you run setup.py anything, it doesn't matter whether you run setup.py eigenfo or setup.py install or build, it will say, hey, setuptools will say, hey, is py2app installed? No, it's not. I'm going to go off to the internet and download py2app and install it, sort of. I'm going to put the egg on your path so that you can use it, but I'm not actually going to install it. And this has a whole raft of issues. You don't get to use the pip cache. So if pip has already downloaded the thing that if your setup requires is also a runtime dependency, you'll now download it twice. And you won't use the pip HTTP configuration for proxies, and you won't look in a wheelhouse that you've got locally because easy install is not pip. It doesn't know about you're having a local cache of stuff that's really fast and good for doing offline installs. So the configuration a lot of people want to do where they do pip, download this thing into a directory, then go to another machine with no internet access and run pip install, no index, and find links from that directory and the thing they really wanted, which people used to do on production servers that are behind firewalls, that sort of scenario. That won't work at all with anything that has setup requires, but unless you manually install all those things first, because easy install is just going to go, hi, and start doing stuff. And you also end up building things that may be expensive, like NumPy, multiple times. So even if you've got a cached wheel of NumPy that can be installed in half a second, easy install is going to go, oh, hi, yeah, I need NumPy to run this setup.py, so I'm going to download it and compile it because I don't know about your wheel cache because I'm not pip. This is actually kind of the fundamental root cause of a whole bunch of problems that people run into when they try and do sophisticated setups, very fast builds, offline environments. Speak up loudly.
Are you saying that pip is invoking easy install?
No, pip invokes sets. Okay, so pip runs this. Right. Okay, and it's running this with the eigenfo command to build an eigenfo thing on disk. And the result of that is that when you have a setup requires in the setup.py, setuptools, so the setup function, one of the first things it does is says, hey, are my requirements satisfied? So it asks package resources says that's not there, then setuptools, the component of setuptools called easy install goes off and does this thing. And everyone who is trying to run these secure, isolated, or highly performant environments starts crying into their cups. So coming soon, TM. We've got kind of social buy-in, but no fully functional set of patches, so it's not even really out of prototype stage, is declarative dependencies, where we can write these dependencies down in a metadata file at a well-known location, like maybe setup.config, and we'll look for that first. And if there are dependencies there in that place, we'll use those rather than running eigenfo. So this will do two things. It'll mean we're not running arbitrary code, So an index server could potentially start consuming these.
You correct your dependencies in two places, right?
Well, no, because setup tool. If we patch setup tools to understand this, I'm going to have to stop very soon. We're getting close to time. If setup tools reads those, so part of doing this in the ecosystem is to make sure that setup tools can read these dependencies and pip can read them. Pip uses setup tools as a library though, so that's actually really teach setup tools to do it, expose it as a public API, and then consume that from pip when a new enough version of setup tools is present. Setup tools can't, I don't want to, so this is really about pip, and there's some more hairy stuff in there. Anyway, the point is that this is going to get a lot better once we manage to get this in place. So let's talk about recursion, because I mean that's the horrible bit about getting new dependencies. Okay, so I've got a whole bunch of packages and I need to install them. Obvious thing, right? You order by your dependencies. Pip didn't always do this, but it's kind of obvious in hindsight. You order by your dependencies. You build some wheels, because if you're going to compile NumPy, you only want to do it once. So you build a wheel specific to this machine, and then you can install from the wheel next time. Great. And then you install it in the order that you were given by the user. There's a horror in here. Anyone want to guess what it is? No, but I mean that's a great way where pip falls down. It's just the setup tools, like the whole ecosystem has got a big gap there at the moment. There's a bunch of interesting discussions trying to move that forward. Users, yes. So build requirements and setup requires are the same thing from this perspective, and header files kind of going to fall in that same category. So in the interest of getting this talk. So actually, everyone's heard of setup tools, right? Who hasn't heard of distribute? Who has heard of distribute? Just checking, right? Okay, everyone is awake. So yeah, so in 0.6, setup tools got forked to distribute, and then distribute merged back as 0.7. And when you install distribute, you get setup tools, and when you upgrade setup tools, having had distribute, you have to get rid of distribute. So when you do from setup tools install setup, you import setup, you may get it from distribute or you may get it from setup tools, and the world is going to end very badly for you if you get the wrong one. Because the stuff they're writing on disk, the package database and so on, that's all coupled together. The defaults for how it installs are coupled together. So yeah, inside distribute 06 tarballs, there is a setup tools directory. This is completely obvious and intuitive to everyone involved in the process. And in pip 7.0, we removed a whole bunch of craft. We had 3 separate places in the code. They were all involved with going, oh yeah, so that's to do with distribute, right? We don't want that anymore. So here's the fun thing. Now, with pip 7.0 and above, if you do this on a precise host, which I think is really about 15% of the pip using population still, if you make a virtual environment, you upgrade pip, you upgrade setup tools, and then you do a list, you still have distribute left behind. And this is going to do bad things. So don't do that. If you make a virtual env on precise, the first thing you should do is upgrade setup tools, which will use the pip that you had at the time that knows about how to special case distribute, and do things like, so this is the PR that removed the support, and one of the things that's kind of the most, really we have to do that things, is that if you did a pip upgrade that upgraded either distribute or setup tools, we had to move those packages to the very front of the list, and both of them together. Because otherwise we'd remove distribute, because distribute conflicts with setup tools, and we know that. The package metadata says that. We'd remove it, but we'd then try and install something else that depends on setup tools being present. No setup tools, boom, the whole thing just stops. So you have to uninstall distribute and then install setup tools. The workaround's gone, and there's a continual stream of bugs on the pip bug tracker at the moment of people going, hey, this is broken for me in subtle ways. Please delete your distribute directory. Oh, now it works. The second thing is cycles. I don't know if anyone mentioned this before, but one of the lovely things is you can have A depends on B depends on A. We break that at a fairly arbitrary point. That's kind of easy code. It's not a horror. But the thing that's a bit horrific, we install packages in the order the user gave them to us. This is a deliberate thing. If you were say install A, B, and C, if A depends on B, we will reorder that and do B first. But wherever we have a choice, we do it in the exact order the user gave it to us. Wheel building is easy, straightforward. I'm going to have to rush now. We've got like 30 seconds. Installation, unpacking wheels is fine. Here's the last big horror. This here is what we run when we run setup.py install. Now the thing that's horrific about it is not the fact that we're running stuff through tokenize and doing line ending mangling. The thing that's horrific is this one statement here, which is the reason for this entire chunk of code in pip. Importing setup tools into a setup.py that uses distutils and not setup tools causes setup tools to monkey patch distutils core so that the setup there does all of the stuff that setup tools fixed, such as recording what files are installed on disk and giving you the ability to do eggs and all of that. So, yeah.
We can do 1 or 2 questions if there are any.
The man in the beard.
Thanks, Robert. So yes, it is a horror story, and you know, software is horrible. We're all going to die. Let's go shopping. How much of this is resolved? I mean, the hacks exist for a reason.
Yes.
The problems exist for reasons.
Yes.
How much of it is, well, if we just wait long enough, we'll be able to deprecate enough stuff and get rid of these, like, versions of operating systems we no longer have to worry about, it can disappear. And it's just a matter of waiting time. How much of it is we need to put decent resources into getting pip actually, you know, maintained and developed and getting better testing of what we're doing when we're putting out releases, and how much of it is we're just going to have to live with this?
All right. So where the thing is, something was released once and it's bad, we have to live with that until the last user of that thing that was released wants to be able to install it. Because we can't go back to a thing that was put up on PyPy in 2004 and say, by the way, we're going to fix that package. That, like, ethically, we've decided that editing other people's code is not okay. So the only route we've got to fix that thing is to figure out workarounds and then code them in our thing and then wait for the users of that to die off. And by die off, I mean stop using the newer versions of pip. Like, we can always say, if you want to install that broken thing over there, use pip less than 8. That's a valid strategy. Moving it forward to actually get really clean stuff and get rid of the run arbitrary code, and you have to run egginfo to be able to get the egginfo, to be able to determine what you need to run the egginfo, and to get rid of those things, that's a resource problem. That's getting people to put patches up to pip and setup tools and warehouse that will tie the things together and to drive the discussion to reach consensus about questions like what should be called and, you know, the trivia. That's a resourcing problem. So more resources will help. But maybe, I don't know, maybe half the problem is the fact that once something bad is out there and on PyPy, it's out there on PyPy for a long time. But kind of the dominating thing today is we don't have better answers. I can't stand up and say, hey, this is what you should do, this will work better. Once we get to that point, then we can say, okay, now the old thing is deprecated. You guys have got 5 years, and then at the end of that, we're going to do a release of pip that doesn't support the old thing, and it will break, and you'll need to choose between newer pip and that old thing, or getting those people that did the old thing to do a newer release. But yeah, resources needed. There's one more question behind you if you've got time. No?
No, sorry.
It's all right.
We're running a little
Thank you
late.
guys for coming along and hearing me rant-ish. Obviously, I'm happy to take questions in the hallway.
As a thank you to Robert, from the rest of us at PyCon, we have a very aptly named thank you mug. Robert.